Hi everyone. Thank you for joining us to hear about Mark's thoughts on connecting activities done via social platforms to the money spent on developing those engagement vehicles. We especially appreciate your time knowing that you are all in the middle of the fourth quarter rush. For anyone who wants to participate via Twitter, you simply need to enter the pound mapping ROI at the end of your tweet and it will get to Eric. Please also take a moment to participate in our poll. We'll share those results with you at the end of the presentation. I'm Betsy Sutherland, and I will be co-hosting today's session with our head of Social Insights, Eric Swain. I've been with Mark for over 20 years, and during that time, I've worked with clients in a variety of industries from CPG, banking, pharma, casual dining, and lodging, just to name a few. During that time, I've guided efforts to help my clients with a variety of information needs, and I was really excited when Eric joined Mark earlier this year. He's brought with him a deep understanding of the social media arena and how we can harness that platform to really help our clients drive their business forward. The objectives of today's session is to cover off on the three phases of understanding social ROI and the social and traditional research techniques you can use to understand those. Eric's going to cover mapping social actions to ROI and discuss 4 different pathways that we can use to get there, and as well as some ideas on how to get started. Let's cover some of the frequently asked questions. Yes, you will be receiving a copy of today's presentation. We will email that out to you tomorrow to the address that you provided. We are recording the webinar today so that you can go back and listen again or share that with a colleague. We will go through the poll and share those results at the end. And we'll be giving you a brief overview of Mark, our social analytic insights, the 3 phases of social ROI, as well as getting started with understanding social ROI, and we'll have Q&A at the end. For those of you who may not be familiar with Mark, we're a collection of about 100 different professionals. We have been providing solutions to our client partners for over 46 years. Our expertise covers a large gamut of industries, and we are part of the Omnicom group of agencies. Our approaches cover qualitative, quantitative, and with Eric's addition, now social media solutions. And on that note, I'm going to turn the baton over to Eric.
Great, thanks, Betsy. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Really appreciate your time. As you saw at the beginning, the mapping ROI hashtag is available for you if you want to tweet out about the presentation, anything you hear, or if you have any questions you want to put in our queue to answer later. Mark Social Analytics and Insights is a division of Mark Research as a whole, but we're really matrixed across the whole organization. And our goal is to extend and augment the research that we already do through a number of traditional methods. We are a unique platform and vendor in this space because we provide multiple views of the social truth of our clients. So we pull from a number of different, both primary and secondary data sources. Primary being those that are at the source of the social network, so API connections with Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, etc. And also secondary, we work with a number of content aggregators and data analytic platforms to aggregate that data for us and then pull it together into some insightful, actionable nuggets of truth. If I were to put in one sentence what we do, it would be distilling wisdom from social data, where wisdom meaning insights that your organization can use immediately and that can actually move your business goals. You know, a number of different platforms are very good at explaining what are the actions going on within social media, basically documenting what is happening. Some platforms are fairly good at understanding what are the engagements between those actions, which people are talking to whom, and to what extent are they conversing and where are they conversing. Where we like to play is somewhere under that line of the water to talk about the intents. Why is this happening? What are the user behaviors? What are the customer intents and passions that are involved in the reasons they choose to make these choices about participating? What are the things in their mind and heart that are causing them to move and causing them to change? And then finally, we focus on the implications. What does social media, what do these social actions actually mean for your business? how do they fit into your business goals, and how do they impact the things that your business cares about. So we're going to cover 3 phases of understanding that social ROI. It is a process that you have to go through. The first should be listening, to understand what is going on with your consumer, and most importantly, to develop some level of a baseline from which to work from. The second phase being planning, so to understand what are your business goals and create a chain of evidence between those goals and your social actions. And we'll discuss what that means. And then finally, measuring. So we're going to talk about 4 different ways that you can find pathways to ROI and how they connect social actions to business goals, and then how you would compare these actions to other media. Along the way, we're going to highlight some of the additional research methods you can add on to see how traditional and social can work together in tandem, one informing the other, sometimes traditional first, sometimes social first. So we'll highlight those as we go through this process. The first phase is to have a baseline through listening. Ralph Nichols puts it very well that the most basic of human needs is to understand and be understood, and the best way to understand is to listen. And I really love this Cuban proverb that listening looks easy, but it's not simple, because every head is a world. Every person, every relationship your brand gets into is dealing with a complete, unique individual that have their own paradigms and perceptions when they encounter your brand. And understanding that takes a deliberate act, and it takes some powerful insights to integrate what you gather out of your consumers with your business team. One of the ways we solve for that is through a report we generate called the Digital Snapshot. It basically provides a high-level view of any given brand or topic, and it does it in mostly a quantitative style, so that we can understand that baseline before executing a marketing action and uncover especially some of the keywords around your brand or around that topic, so we can find that consumer voice behind those complicated issues. This is a very quick and easy project for us to turn around in about 7 to 10 business days, and it helps us really communicate what is the landscape around and for your brand, or around a given issue. Sometimes our clients are asking about freshness or quality or taste or flavors or things that don't necessarily tie to a brand, and we can find a way to report on that through a digital snapshot. Another method of listening that we use, and you should probably use as well, you use probably Google and Google Alerts. This is our Google Alerts on steroids. We call it Focus Feed. It allows us to collect keyword mentions from across the web and across social networks, any publicly available network. And we use very highly targeted and unique scenarios, sometimes upwards of 300 keyword scenarios apiece, so that we're finding that nugget of actionable conversation, particularly for community managers, but also for market researchers, to understand where these conversations are and look for things that are outside the box of just my brand or just my competitors. This tool is particularly impactful, again, for that community manager, because we can deliver those results either in an RSS feed or in a daily email. And this gives a jump start to their day so that they know exactly which conversations to engage with at the beginning of their day at that moment. A third practice we use is called social ethnography. If the digital snapshot is more of our quantitative analysis, this is where we get more qualitative. We actually partner between the social analytics and insights group and our qualitative group to develop this deliverable. We basically train more of an anthropological lens on the social data. And we're focused on 2 things. The first being those themes of content listed there. That indicates for us what are the most common topics being discussed amongst a group, where they may not fit into a given keyword, but we can interpret and infer what other topic is being discussed by that audience. And the second, maybe more important thing, is those patterns of behavior. So for example, one of my clients previously was in the coin collecting space, and we noticed in their social landscape a number of Twitter handles that were publishing out links to eBay sales for coins over and over and over and over again, where these Twitter handles had basically become the stock ticker for that community. And we advised our client about how to take advantage of that type of behavior and participate in that kind of behavior. The deliverables out of this process are very similar to what you'll see out of qualitative research, sometimes with even faster timelines because we're not involved in a recruiting process and we're relying on self-disclosed data. It has some limitations, but it's also an excellent practice to go into before executing some level of qualitative research because we can make a focus group even smarter and more well-informed through the practice of social ethnography. Here's an example of what goes on inside of social ethnography. This is an example of a sentiment report we pulled for one of our clients. It's a casual dining restaurant. You can see inside of there's quite a bit of positive comments through news and blogs about that brand. We also noticed there was quite a bit of negative sentiment around that brand within forums. So what we did is take a qualitative view, again, that anthropological view, to look inside the bars and find out what's actually going on inside those spaces. If you take a look more closely, we found that most of the positive sentiment in news and in blogs, was referring to a coupon that client had just released. The coupon was for a free menu item, and the coupon was getting shared like wildfire. Just absolutely everyone sharing it as much and as often as they possibly could. And while all of those comments mentioned the brand, and while all of those comments said, great coupon, thanks for the coupon, love the coupon, and racked up the positive sentiment, they weren't directly about the brand, they're about the coupon. And they didn't really contribute to that brand's overall perception. If you look inside the forums, we found a number of healthy eating forums racking up some negative sentiment about the brand. And it was about concepts like this. This brand, their food sometimes came on the wrong side of the eat this, not that equation. And the pattern that we noticed was that inside of these forums, a number of people would post about a menu item, or they're going to this CDR and would find that menu item. And then others would contribute to the conversation and tell them how to basically hack the meal, how to make smart choices about specific ingredients of the meal, leaving out the shell, avoid the chips and salsa, remove the sour cream, and basically change that meal item from something unhealthy to something more healthy. And we were able to make a recommendation back to the client that if they could integrate this type of substitution into their menu or into their ordering process, it would really help capture that healthy eating segment back at this property. It would help that brand raise its perception within that segment. Betsy, here there's some other tools that we can use as well. We mentioned qualitative. Why don't you explain some of what's going on there?
Sure, Eric. As you outlined earlier, social is just another one of those tools we can use to listen to our consumers or potential consumers. It can be used to inform traditional research techniques like qualitative and can be really useful when you're embarking on a new territory. One of our clients recently decided that they wanted to venture into a new product arena, and social listening was a really great way to begin developing that understanding of the consumer vocabulary. Thus, when we moved into the more traditional focus group arena, we had an ingoing baseline knowledge of how consumers talked about this product category, how they interacted with it, what were the appropriate words to use. And it was very helpful because we had some ingoing hypotheses of how consumers talked about things, and in fact, we found out that we were wrong. So when we did start doing the focus groups, we were able to speak to the consumer and spend a lot more time understanding the why behind what they were saying versus developing that understanding of what it was that they did say about this category. So it's a very useful way to dovetail in with qualitative. Eric, I'm going to turn it back to you on that.
Great. The next phase of social ROI measurement is the planning phase. Before you execute a marketing action, it's always great to have a plan, not just for what that action should be and look like, but for how you're going to measure it and how it's going to impact your business goals. Too often I see many of my clients participating in social actions and then trying to map it back to goals after the fact. And the difficulty there is you're not planned ahead of time for what you want to measure and what you want to focus on deliberately. A proper planning phase beforehand can really help avoid that issue. Planning is all about understanding what are your business goals. And the reason for this is that the analyses for ROI that you perform are going to vary wildly depending on what those business goals are. Take some of these, for example. Increasing year over year sales of a widget through retail channels takes a very different type of analysis than looking for a positive opinion about an initiative or generating qualified leads for a sales team. Each one of these types of business goals is going to require me as a researcher to measure different things when I'm looking at my social media. And the more I can set up those measurements ahead of time, ahead of that research, ahead of that execution, the more I'm going to be able to inform that execution and help guide and direct it if it's not meeting our business goals. So if business goals are the fulcrum, the middle, the judge of whether we're successful, return on investment is simply that. It's just a scales between two elements, investment and return. Now, on both sides of the scale, there are a number of things that fall, and some of these things are monetary and some of the things are non-monetary. So on the investment side, some of the more monetary things for an organization may be hard costs like tools or software. They may be a product given away or sweepstakes or some insurance for that sweepstakes. Or there may be development of an app or a tool or a game. Some of these may be kind of below the water in terms of headcount or in terms of freelancers. These costs all come together and they all have different monetary values, if at all, for an organization. Sometimes the biggest investment is simply that organizational capital to get something going. Simply that capital that you must spend by creating connections with your colleagues and informing them and driving them towards a given program can be an investment because it takes your time, your effort, and it takes your focus, your opportunity cost away from other things. At the same time, there are monetary and non-monetary returns that come back from social practices. Obviously, e-commerce purchases are very easy to track within social media. And you might be able to track things like call center hours saved, where you're seeing what kinds of savings you're having over someone staying on the phone with a consumer instead of them interacting through social channels. Qualified leads, especially in a B2B space, are much harder to measure in terms of return for monetary reasons because if the sales cycle is quite long, it can be years before you actually see a return on that lead. But even though that is a long sales cycle, when that lead comes in, it is a return on the investment in social media. The same goes with loyalty programs. If you generate signups for a given loyalty program, it's going to take some time before you see the return on that participant. However, you can say that that is a return on the investment of social media because you know through that loyalty program how that loyalty program improves the spend or yield or frequency of that consumer. Many companies tend to measure in what I'll call the wrong direction. And they look at it from an investment to return direction. So for investment, you can easily tell what your social activity metrics are. You know how much you put in, and you know what happened in terms of fans and followers and likes and tweets and retweets, etc. Those are fairly easy to measure because each social network displays those metrics on their own. What usually happens is that many organizations start making some poor choices about how to connect that to a return. There might be some estimate of increased loyalty. Our fans, quote, tend to purchase from us more, and therefore there's some increased estimate of purchase behavior, maybe in frequency or in yield. And then there's some estimated financial impact off of that, that since these individuals are connected to us through social channels, and since they have an estimated increase in purchase behavior, then therefore they're estimated to have an increased financial impact on our organization, which connects you down to some estimated return. This chain of evidence, if you will, is not going to hold water when it comes to comparing to something more hard or direct. And it feeds that vicious cycle of social media can't be measured, that mantra that a number of organizations have. The better way to approach social media is to scrap that and let's start again. But then let's look at starting with the goal in mind. So let's start with that return. If we begin there, we can easily see from the return what are the business goals we need to drive that return. So for example, if your return is driving year-over-year sales, one of your business goals may be, if you're a retailer, driving foot traffic in store. And you know that the more foot traffic you get in store, the more your sales increase, and therefore the more able you are to hit that return. From that business goal, the next step is to identify what are the online conversion points that can drive that business goal. Again, with the retailer example, if it's driving foot traffic in store, the online conversion point may be a downloadable coupon, because we know that consumers that have downloaded this coupon tend to come into the store, especially if the coupon's a great motivator. We can also track that coupon when it gets in store, so I can confirm that journey from online to offline. If you're in a B2B space, the online conversion may be something like a lead gen form, where I want to drive individuals to that lead gen form to sign up. If my sales cycle is short enough, I can see how leads coming from social media are affecting ultimate ROI, or some kind of purchase cycle. There's a number of different ways to measure those online conversions, but typically most organizations already have this in place because most organizations have some form of digital presence outside of social media. Most of them already have a website by now. And they know what they want done on that website, or should to some degree. And so adding on to that through social channels is actually a lot easier. So once I understand those online conversions, those points that I want a consumer to hit, now I can understand how I want to motivate those online conversions through social activity, through conversations that I'm having with consumers. And I want to make the point here that it's not about every single post needs to have a link to e-commerce or something along those lines. One of the best ways to improve your online conversion rate from social is to improve your own brand's reputation within that channel. And improving reputation, as you know, takes a wide array of things playing together in concert. It could be your ability to have conversations with consumers that have nothing to do with your brand. It could be your ability to generate comments on a blog post with your consumers. It could be a number of different things, and those are all separate metrics to measure. But it's not always about sell, sell, sell. It's also about reputation. It's also about your reach. You have to develop a following to some degree in order to be able to broadcast or share your message. And the more reach you have, the more chances you have to engage with consumers. But again, no one goal should be in the lead in terms of social conversations. It only should be the whole that leads towards these online conversions that move towards business goals. Let's take a look at some examples about how brands have used this planning process and created social campaigns to drive their business goals. For example, last year, Ford released their 2011 Explorer on Facebook, which was a bold move because a number of competitors were releasing their new auto models at auto shows or through other channels. Ford's goal was simply to drive purchases of the new Ford Explorer after that launch. They wanted to drive people to the dealership to pick up that brand new Ford Explorer. The results actually moved that goal quite well. They saw a 3 times greater lift in the shopping day after that campaign than their competitors did from their own Super Bowl ads, where that year Super Bowl ads were running $2.5 million for a 30-second spot. Obviously, the Ford Facebook reveal costs much less than that, so their return on investment was actually quite good compared to their competitors' actions within the Super Bowl ads and paid media. Let's take another look at an example from Pizza Hut. Pizza Hut is well documented for what they've done within the Super Bowl this year and how they interact with the consumers. The goal was to drive and create awareness around the $10 any pizza deal. And they had a number of PR actions leading up to the Super Bowl. But once the kickoff started, they really honed in and focused on social media as a part of that practice and a way to drive impressions. So if we measure social media against that goal of creating awareness, they actually did quite well. They generated over 39 million impressions after launch, and they generated a 400% increase in impressions per conversion just on Facebook alone. So they really did drive more pizza being ordered, and they drove a clear ROI off of their social media. You know, Betsy, there's a number of ways that traditional research participates in planning as well, and brand profiling is a great example of that. Maybe you could discuss that.
Sure, and I think one thing I wanted to reiterate is just with traditional research, your points about social media having goals need to be set is really good because we really, in order to help our business partners move their business forward, we need to help them set standards for determining what is a success versus what is not a success. Particularly within the traditional world, when we were thinking about a new campaign or a new initiative, we should go in and help our clients understand, who's buying their brand, who's using their brand, who's using the competitive brands, and really set up that landscape and that goal for what does success look like. So post that campaign and post that launch, we can then go back and look at that brand profile and find out, were we able to move our users to a more desirable profile? Were we able to get our competitive users to switch over to us? So I think it's really critical for us to help business partners know that social media is something that should be evaluated within a goal framework, and anything we can do to help them is really important.
Thanks, Betsy.
So Eric, back to you.
So the third phase of understanding your social ROI is, now that you've got a listening baseline, and now that you've developed a plan to know what to measure, it's time to get down to the business of actually measuring. Since you know your business goals, it's time to map how does social activity connect back over to those business goals. And there are basically 4 different types of pathways to get there. Excuse me. There may be others, but I've tended to see most of them group in this type of format, and those being attribution, assists, advocacy, and awareness. Let's take a look at attribution. Attribution simply means that we have a validated linkage direct from social action to business conversation. So for example, a retailer may post on Facebook a link to their e-commerce site. That link will be shortened usually, or especially if they're using Twitter, that link will be shortened through a tool maybe like Bitly or Adly or a number of other tools. That shortened link, I can track that link, and I can measure how many times people click on it and where they go from that, and how often that link was shared. All of those metrics can contribute to how often my business goal is being achieved. Here's an example of that link tracking in place. Bitly Pro offers a dashboard of where my links are being shared and what links I've generated. And then if I embed a campaign tag within that link before I shorten it, I can track on Google Analytics that campaign tag coming in to see how successful each of my campaigns were, and to judge a QR code versus a coupon versus Facebook versus Twitter. One of the pilot programs that we're getting into is to leverage the strong analytics background of Mark Research and our ability to forecast and line up analytic data into creating what we call consumer experience correlations. If you take a look at strict business intelligence data, number of units sent, shipped, sailed, etc., there's a lot of ways that directed research, such as survey data, satisfaction surveys, trackers, and qualitative data, can overlay on top of that and provide some insights to that. But if we take that data and we combine that also with social data, we can start to correlate them either temporally or through other methods to see where are the leads and lags between the 3 sets of data. Effectively, we can start to create ourselves an early warning system. We can start to see actions in social data that tend to move the needle in terms of business data. And we can start to measure and forecast which actions in social data are most likely to affect our business data in a positive way. These correlations actually are interesting because they don't rely on a human to pick out if my brand name is mentioned more often, then my brand sales will go up. That may be true, but we can also search for and find correlative components between maybe non-related keywords. I saw a similar study done on the nonprofit side like this, and they found that there was a relationship between mentions of doctor and fever and soreness on Twitter and flu cases in a given area. And we're finding anecdotally that we're seeing the same types of relationships between social data and business data. The second pathway to ROI is to measure assists. This is social actions playing a documented role in the consumer journey to conversion. This is really where you start to see a term called social CRM come to play. And if you're a B2B vendor or B2B business, this is where you really need to focus. Your sales cycle is going to be very long, so the actual number of people clicking on a link and purchasing a $45,000 product probably going to be fairly low. But when I can start to track at an individual level who these individuals are in social media and connect that with social actions I've had with them recently, then I can start to attribute social as a part of their journey towards conversion. Google is starting to get into this game as well with multi-channel conversion funnels through the analytics platform. You can set up a conversion funnel and it will start tracking how different elements of digital marketing are playing a role towards conversion. So again, we talked about those online conversion points. If that online conversion point is, let's say, a lead generation or data capture form, I can track that as a conversion funnel and start to see where social is playing a role along the way. The real secret sauce is to start getting more granular to see if social is more valid for a tool as a tool for promoting traffic for form A versus form B. If there are changes I can make in social actions that will affect my conversion rate at that form. There's a number of different ways to work with this data, but attributing social to an assist along the way to conversion can help you make that chain of evidence even stronger and push that consumer towards the goal you want them to get at. The third method of tracking ROI is through advocacy. And while this is a non-monetary type of return, it is actually a very strong type of return because we know that consumers are more likely to validate and accept a recommendation from their friends and family than they are from a given brand. So any brand action that can stimulate a consumer to recommend within their social graph is going to be beneficial for the brand as a whole. FanCore is an interesting platform that lets you measure and track that advocacy because what they do is allow you to invite some of your best advocates into a specialized team, almost a SWAT team of sorts, and then you can assign tasks out to that team. So the people that already love your brand can be more engaged with your brand and can get some returns for executing different tasks on behalf of your brand, which pushes your brand message out through them rather than your own branded channels. And the final pathway to ROI is awareness. So we all understand that brand social actions can be shared and they can reach far beyond that brand's natural social graph. If I have 1,600 followers on Twitter, when I execute a social action that's successful, it's going to get shared to many, many, many more than 1,600 people. And this is something that many brands are measuring already. But what's important is to track that virality aspect of what you're sharing, not just how many impressions you're generating. So for example, hash tracking is a tool for tracking a hashtag. And what a hashtag is that # before a word in Twitter. So for example, blog chat is a very successful hashtag because it's a weekly chat where people get together on Twitter and they use that tag to talk to each other and to track each other's tweets back and forth. And that tag generates over 12 million impressions, sometimes 13 million per week. But the fact is, it's not just the fact that they generate a lot of impressions. It's that the audience and the spread of that hashtag is enormous. It starts with single individuals, but it spreads out wider and wider and wider into that network through viral means, rather than some one individual having a large audience that they broadcast to. Facebook has also revamped how they provide their insights platform to give us some more insight into reach as well. Now on Facebook pages, I can see not only who my fans are and how they come in, but I can see who's talking about this page, who's discussing this brand. And as I view that, I can start to see how my impressions are being carried by my own social graph beyond my brand's reach. So Betsy, we've been doing awareness tracking for quite some time offline. I think that has some great dovetails with social media as well.
Oh, it definitely does. One of the things that really excites me about social media is it allows us to start developing that understanding for our partners of what's going on behind those bumps or those drops in awareness. I'm sure the majority of the people on the phone or online understand the anxiety that comes up when there's a drop in brand awareness or there's a sharp increase in brand awareness and the brand person says, why is that going on? Help me understand that. And with social media, we can go online and quickly start understanding what were people talking about during that time period, what things were not there before, what things are there now, and really provide that peeling back of the onion to help provide really insightful learning behind those shifts in awareness, whatever, be it brand or ad or what have you. So I think that's really one of the best dovetails that comes to mind about how these two pieces can work together very nicely. And that way we're not having to spend a lot of time within the survey asking people why did they say that and trying to get those drivers from them. Rather, we can look and see what's happening out in the world at large.
Great, thanks Betsy.
So Eric, I think it's back to you to
So,
talk about how we get started.
so if we want to take a look at how to get started, how to really start putting this into practice once you get back to your workday, I think there's three things to look at. The first is to start with some small projects. You want to get a baseline running of at least some aspects of your organization. And I think instead of trying to boil the ocean and see your organization as a whole, you may want to take a look at just 1 to 2 brands or products or even campaigns or topics. You may want to take a look at a given issue related to one of your brands or topics and just try to investigate that and get a baseline of where consumers are in relation to that brand or product. The second thing I recommend is starting to gather these shoeboxes of data, if you will. A lot of organizations have this data between business data and research data and social data, but since these data sources enter the organization kind of organically, they tend to be siloed amongst those organizations. So social data tends to live with the social team, who probably is living inside of marketing or PR and may or may not have connection to marketing research. Business data tends to live within finance or ops, who may or may not have connections to marketing and PR, and also may or may not have connections to marketing research. So reaching out to your colleagues and starting to gather that data together will give you the opportunity to start to build these correlations between those data sets. And the third thing I'd recommend is really just to get out and get social with your own colleagues. Something I've found with interacting with a number of my clients here at Mark is that a number of market researchers don't yet know who's executing social actions on their brand's behalf, or if they do, they haven't met them or integrated with them or acted with them yet. I think just making the handshake and getting outside the cube is going to be an important step to start collecting that data and getting integrated in with those practices, because the more marketing research can be informed as a whole by every aspect of the organization, the more we can help optimize every aspect of the organization. So that's the end of the presentation. I know that we have a number of questions already, and I want to get those out. But if you have any questions, you're welcome to type them in at the Q&A panel inside of the presentation here. We'd love to have those, and we can accept quite a few because I think we've got about 10 more minutes.
And while we're waiting for some more questions to pop in, I wanted to share the answers to our poll about how involved are you with the organization's use of social media research. Roughly half of our participants today are extremely involved, followed by about a third saying that they're somewhat involved. Only 1 in 10 of our participants says that their organization is not currently utilizing social research. All right, Eric, are you ready for your first question?
Absolutely.
Okay, someone wants to know, what tools do you use to gather social data for an ROI analysis, and how do you use those tools?
That's a great question. There's a lot of tools available for social research, and sometimes we get overwhelmed by the number of tools available to us. I would take a look at two different categories of tools. The first one is some level of web analytics tools. You need to be connected in with that web analytics layer so you can measure those online conversion points and watch how consumers are tracking into a website to convert. And the second layer of tools is some type of social engagement measurement. There are a number of platforms, and probably your social team, if you're not on it, is already using one of these platforms. So Radian6's Engagement Console, Sysimo's Heartbeat, Hootsuite, CoTweet. There's a number of different platforms that let a social team publish out social data and deal with social conversations coming in. Any view you have into that social data of that conversation back and forth is going to start helping you with that orientation of social data to business data. And actually, a third category I'd recommend is starting to look at some kind of pure social research tool or some kind of vendor in that space. Um, you want to be able to view your brand, excuse me, not just in terms of brand keywords, how many times your brand's name is being mentioned, but as issues come up, as new products come up, you want to be able to research those as well and provide social insights to your team. So partnering with a platform or vendor or service in that space is going to help you as well.
Eric, we've got another question from someone wanting to understand how they can measure their ROI with a sales cycle that doesn't really include online purchases.
Yeah, that's an that does get tricky because for a retailer, you have an e-commerce channel and you can measure the impact to that e-commerce channel fairly easily. I would take a look at um, what are the actual things that make the organization move forward. So, for example, one of my friends works in the nonprofit space. There are a number of different things that help his brand move forward. Obviously, donations is one of them, and he can track that fairly easily. But the next thing he's looking at is advocacy as one of those pathways to ROI. He's looking for people to share the story of his organization and to push his brand forward. So that's always something that he is aware of and measuring both on his website and in his social platforms. Uh, you want to be able to track that sales cycle from its inception to its completion. So a number of B2B spaces don't have a real good handle on when people come into my radar of view as prospects and when people get to conversion and actually purchase from me. And if you don't have that view, it's very hard to add on any kind of social assists or social data. So gathering those types of data and understanding what moves your organization forward are really going to help you even though you have a long sales cycle or maybe even a non-monetary sales cycle.
I think you just said something somebody liked. Someone is now asking if they want to carry this forward to some of their brand partners, what type of budget would they need to give as a ballpark for doing an ROI analysis?
Yeah, this doesn't have to be a very expensive process. A lot of social media doesn't take a lot of hard costs. And so we see that as well in terms of what we provide to our clients. The digital snapshot report I mentioned can be done for easily under 10K, usually in the range of 5 to 8. So we're able to provide that at a pretty competitive price point, and it fits into budgets that have just a little bit of money left here or there. The overall aspects of monitoring and reviewing ROI, I think one of the advantages we have is that we resource a lot of social platforms in-house here at Mark, and then we're able to provide them to our clients as they need them. So instead of the client basically buying a car and driving it 2 miles, we're able to let them rent the car effectively so that they're not having to rely on a huge budget for huge tools. We can provide that size of tool without them having to invest a huge amount of their budget.
Okay. Does anyone else have any other questions that they'd like to ask before we wrap this up? All right, here's another question that popped up. How do you know that companies are not sending tweets and posts to promote their products themselves? How can we separate out the self-promoters from the actual conversation of consumers?
Absolutely, a lot of measurement. If the company itself is generating a lot of social content, it's sometimes hard to differentiate between content generated by the company and content generated either on behalf of the company or genuinely from individuals in social platforms. At Mark, we use some filtration processes to remove that false data, if you will. So we can attribute specific voices. So those could be social handles or specific authors of social data. We can attribute them to, quote, belonging to the brand, and we can exclude them from specific reports or resources. We can also look for given behaviors. So if we see something from the brand that just keeps happening and it has a similar format, we can exclude that as well.
Okay. And can you talk a little bit about how mobile apps are being leveraged to reach customers with things like the QR coded coupons?
Sure, there's a lot of different ways that mobile and social interweave and overlap. Mobile devices have really become our social gateways when we're outside of a laptop scenario. And the iPad and the tablet space has really even broken that model even further to where we might not even need the keyboard anymore to be able to participate socially. Um, there's one of the best ways I've seen to measure mobile is in looking at location-based or geography-based social networks. So Foursquare is one of the top mentioned ones, but Facebook Places has a role as well. There's a number of businesses that can help you, and we can as well, with understanding how your consumers are interacting with different locations that are related to your brand. What I mean by that is, particularly if your brand has a lot of different locations, such as a retailer, we can take a look at how those consumers are using mobile devices and social and creating social impact while they're at each of these locations. And we can look at which locations are having the most impact and the most, quote, ROI for your business.
Okay, Eric, one more question. How do you measure sentiment when you have positive, negative, and neutral comments?
Sentiment is a difficult measurement because we're using a computer to read social posts, which always has its problems. You can never gather things like sarcasm or irony through an algorithm because it shifts dramatically. And if we're looking globally, other languages is a whole other game, and it's very, very difficult at that point. The most important thing I mention to clients about sentiment is to consider it more of a directional indicator. So if we're seeing large swings in sentiment or large portions being attributed to positive or negative, it's time to investigate that. But if you're seeing minor differences in sentiment related to sorted issues, they may or may not be correlative. And that's where we tend to apply more of our qualitative practice to once we understand sentiment is indicating there's a need for research, we'll actually deploy more qualitative tactics to understand what is that need, what is going on inside those bars, and how is it impacting the business as a whole.
Okay, great. In interest of getting everyone onto their next meeting, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap this up now. For those of you who submitted questions that we weren't able to address, we will respond back to you on an individual level. And if anyone has other questions, feel free to contact Eric or myself. Our cards are up here and our phone numbers. So thank you for participating. We appreciate your time and have a good rest of the day.
Thanks, everyone.